Last night, I discovered my late husband's armchair was gone from the living room. The cabinet he built by hand in 1983 was also missing. Online. I found them listed for sale. The account used a photo of my own house as the backdrop. Tomorrow morning, my daughter-in-law's doorbell will ring. It won't be me arriving. It will be the police. My name is Eleanor Sutter. I am 68 years old, and for the last 4, I have been a widow. For 41 years before I retired, I was the chief accountant at Northgate Ledger Works. My entire life has been built on the principle that things must balance. Every entry must have a counter-entry. Every asset must be accounted for. I live in the same red brick house in North Asheville that my husband, Thomas, and I bought when we were young. It's a solid, quiet house on a street lined with maple trees that turn impossibly bright in the fall. The inside of my house is not modern. It is filled with walnut, cherry, and oak. It is filled with things that were built to last, things that have held the weight of our lives. Thomas himself was a hobbyist carpenter, and his hands are in the joinery of the bookcases, the heft of the dining table, the solid feel of the banister. These are not just assets, they are sentimental ledgers. My son, Mark, lives 30 minutes away. It might as well be 300 miles. His wife is Tessa. She is energetic, always vibrating with a new idea, a new app, a startup mindset that sees everything old as something to be disrupted. She speaks in terms of scaling, pivoting, and maximizing. She sees my home not as a place of memory, but as untapped inventory. We haven't spoken not really in almost a year. The silence began after the fight. They had come over for Sunday dinner, and Tessa, sipping her wine, had brought up proactive estate planning. It was a conversation that quickly pivoted from concern to appraisal. She talked about the carrying costs of a house this large, the market value of the antiques, and how irresponsible it was to let such capital sit and collect dust. I told her that my capital was my business, and Thomas's memory was not for sale. Mark sat silent, looking at his plate. They left before dessert. That silence was a heavy, static-filled thing. Until this evening. It is Friday. The house was quiet when I came home from the grocery store. It was the quality of the light in the living room that felt wrong first. It was too open. Where Thomas's deep-set walnut armchair used to be, there was only a rectangle of faded hardwood floor. And against the far wall, the shaker-style cabinet he built in 1983, the one where I kept the photo albums, was gone. I stood there, the grocery bags heavy in my hands. There was no broken glass. The front door had been locked, just as I left it. I walked slowly into the room. On the floor, I saw 4 shallow divots where the armchair's feet had rested for 20 years. Near the wall, a set of long, thin scuff marks marred the polyurethane finish, leading directly to the entryway. A small drift of fine, pale dust, a mix of plaster and wood shavings, was scattered near the baseboard, disturbed, as if by a dolly's wheel. My heart was not racing. It was cold. It was methodical. I went to my office. The small metal lockbox where I keep vital documents was in its drawer, untouched. I opened it with my key. The property deed, my husband's death certificate, my passport all present. But in the small, felt-lined tray, where 2 spare house keys had always sat, there was only one, a violation, a quiet, calculated entry. As I closed the drawer, my phone buzzed on the desk, a text message from Mark. It was the first one in 4 months. It contained only 8 words. How are you? We'll stop by tomorrow. The timing was precise. It was chilling. I did not text back. I did not reach for the phone to call 911. An accusation is a final, indelible entry in a ledger, and you do not make it without a complete audit. I am an accountant. I need proof. Instead, I went to the bookcase and pulled out the heavy, leather-bound album marked 1980 to 1985. I opened it on the dining room table. There, in a glossy photograph from Christmas of 1983, was the cabinet, new and perfect. On the back of the photo, in my own neat cursive, I had written the details, a habit from my years of insuring the firm's assets. Walnut veneer cabinet, custom build T, Sutter, deck 1983, dimensions 60, HX36, WX18, D. I turned the page. There was Thomas, smiling, sitting in his armchair. I ran my finger over the picture. I knew the unique knot in the wood grain on the left armrest. I knew the exact dimensions of the seat cushion. I would recognize them anywhere. My house was no longer just a home. It was a file, and I was beginning the audit. I sat at my desk, the glow of the monitor casting long shadows in the quiet office. I did not search for stolen furniture. I searched for assets. I opened 3 browser tabs, the local Craigslist, the Facebook marketplace for the Asheville area, and a regional auction site. My fingers were steady on the keyboard. I typed heirloom walnut chair. I typed vintage shaker cabinet. I typed 1980s custom woodwork. The first few pages were noise, recliners, cheap particle board, modern farmhouse imitations. I refined the search, filtering by posted in the last 24 hours. And there it was. The account name was Blue Ridge Finds. The listing title was Gorgeous Mid-Mod Walnut Display Cabinet, Rare Find. The price was listed at $800, cash only, quick pickup. But it was the photograph that made my blood freeze. It was my cabinet. It was sitting in what looked like a cluttered garage, poorly lit. But the seller, trying to capture the quality of the glass door, had caught a reflection. It was faint, but it was undeniable. Reflected in the glass was the distinct diamond-patterned lid light of my own living room window, the one that faces the street. My training took over. I was no longer a grieving widow. I was an auditor securing a chain of evidence. I moved the mouse, precisely. I saved the main image. Then I took a full-screen capture of the entire listing. I saved it as a BMP file, uncompressed. I then used the browser's print function to save the entire web page, URL and timestamp included, as a PDF document. I noted the exact time, 9:47 p.m. I noted the listing ID number. I copied the URL into a new text document. I opened my own digital photo album. I pulled up the Christmas 1983 photograph and zoomed in. I then zoomed in on the listing photo from Blue Ridge Finds. On the brass handle of the bottom drawer of my cabinet, there is a small, crescent-shaped scratch. Thomas made it the day he installed it, when his screwdriver slipped. In the marketplace photo, under the poor lighting, the light caught that exact crescent-shaped flaw, a perfect match. I had the what. Now I needed the how. My doorbell camera. I rarely checked it, but it kept a rolling 7-day history. I opened the app on my computer and scrolled back. Yesterday, Thursday, 2:14 p.m. I was at my weekly volunteer shift at the library. The video feed flickered, then focused. A car I recognized. Tessa's sleek, dark grey crossover pulled into my driveway. She got out. wearing athletic leggings and a baseball cap pulled low. She walked to the front door, looked left and right down the street, and then, instead of ringing the bell, she punched a code into the smart lock keypad. It was the old code, the emergency family code I had set 5 years ago, the one I had never thought to delete. The lock clicked open. The video showed her entering. It did not show her leaving. The motion sensor on the front door must not have caught her exit, which meant she must have left through the side gate leading to the back alley. My hands were cold. I went to my email inbox. I typed security into the search bar. An email from my antique and collectibles insurance provider, dated 6 days ago. Subject security alert. New login detected. I had missed it, assuming it was spam. I opened it. A login to your account occurred from a new device IP address originating in Hendersonville. That was near where Mark and Tessa lived. The alert detailed that the user had accessed the policyholder's itemized inventory list, the list that contained the exact descriptions and appraisal values of my furniture. A new piece clicked into place. The neighbor, a young man named Devon, in his 30s, had moved into the carriage house down the alley 3 months ago. He ran some kind of moving or hauling business. I often saw his small white box truck parked near the side gate. It had been there yesterday afternoon. I remembered seeing it when I got home from the library, but I hadn't given it a second thought. This was not an impulse. This was planned. I stood up and went to my desk drawer. I took out a small, pen-sized ultraviolet flashlight and a clear ink UV marker. I had gotten them years ago at a neighborhood watch security seminar. I walked through my home. The dining room table Thomas built, the cherrywood rocker, the grandfather clock in the hall, on the underside of each piece, in a place no one would ever see. I made a small, invisible mark, my initials. Yes. If my property was going to be moved, it would be traceable. I returned to my desk, opened a new spreadsheet file, and began to build my ledger. Column A, item description. Walnut armchair, T, Sutter build, 1979. Shaker cabinet, T, Sutter build, 1983. Column B, identifying marks. Unique knot left arm. Crescent scratch, bottom handle. Column C, estimated value insurance appraisal, 2022. Column D, status. Suspected stolen. Column E, evidence link. Blue Ridge finds listing. ID 45B881. Doorbell cam 1414 Thurs. I was documenting the theft of my life, piece by piece, and I was preparing the invoice. They arrived just after 10 on Saturday morning, as Mark's text had promised. The doorbell rang. They did not use the code this time. I opened the door. Tessa lunged forward for a hug I did not return, holding a white paper bag between us as a barrier. Eleanor, we've missed you so much. Mark hovered behind her, shifting his weight. Hey, Mum, you doing okay? I'm managing, I said. I stepped back, letting the cooler morning air follow them into my home. You brought waffles? From that new place downtown, Tessa said. She was already walking into the living room, her eyes scanning, assessing. She was a hummingbird of nervous energy, dressed in expensive-looking white sneakers and a sleek ponytail. This house has such amazing bones. You know, Mark and I were just talking about how much easier life gets when you streamline, especially heading into retirement. She ran a single, manicured finger along the top of a bookshelf, picking up a line of dust that I had deliberately left. It's all about preserving the value of these things, isn't it? Instead of just letting them sit here and gather dust. I see. I said. I did not offer them coffee. I watched her gaze slide right over the empty space where the cabinet had been, a flawless performance of nonchalance. She pivoted toward the kitchen. I'll just grab a plate for these. Mark sat on the sofa, the one opposite the void where his father's chair used to be. He leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. He looked tired. He had his father's hands, but not his father's spine. Mum, we were worried, he began, his voice low. We haven't heard from you in so long. Not since, you know, that argument last year. I've been busy, I said. Right. But it got me thinking, he said, dropping his voice further, as if sharing a confidence. About practical things. We really should talk about updating the financial proxy contact. You know, just in case. If something happens, you wouldn't want assets getting tied up in probate. It's just paperwork. Really. To make things easier for you. He was asking for the keys to the vault. He was trying to sound responsible. But all I heard was a script. I kept my face perfectly still. A mask I had perfected over 41 years of boardroom audits. I looked from my son to the empty wall behind him. Mark, I said, my voice quiet, but cutting through his rehearsed speech. Where is your father's cabinet? He flinched, a small, involuntary jerk. From the kitchen, there was the sharp clatter of a ceramic plate hitting the granite countertop. Tessa walked back in, forcing a bright, brittle laugh. The cabinet, goodness. Eleanor, you're starting to misplace things. Are you sure you didn't send it out for repair? Maybe to get the finish redone? It was looking a little worn. She was testing me, seeing if I was confused, seeing if I was frail. No, I said. My gaze locked on hers. I did not send it for repair. It was here on Thursday evening when I went to the library. It was gone on Friday morning, along with the walnut armchair. Mum, that's impossible, Mark said, standing up, his voice cracking. Who would... At that exact moment, a sharp, electronic chime came from Tessa's phone, which she had placed face up on the end table. The screen lit up. The notification banner was large enough for me to read from where I stood. It was a Marketplace app logo. The text read, "Offer accepted, your mid-mod cabinet is sold." Tessa snatched the phone. Her thumb mashed the side button, blanking the screen. Her smile was cemented in place, but her eyes were darting around the room, calculating. That's just spam, she said, slipping the phone into her back pocket. These apps are so aggressive. Mark cleared his throat, rushing to fill the sudden, cold silence. Taxes. Mum? That's another thing. The property taxes on this place must be a nightmare. You shouldn't have to bear that entire burden alone. Tessa and we've been looking at some options. Some ways to liquidate non-essential assets to create a cushion for you. Liquidate, I repeated. The word was sterile, clinical, the word an accountant uses before a write-off. My finances are perfectly in order? Mark? My cushion is adequate. I looked directly at Tessa. But I do have a housekeeping matter to discuss. Of course, she said, a little too quickly. Anything? The old family emergency code for the front door, the one I gave you 5 years ago. I need you to return it. Mark looked confused. Return it, Mum? It's just a number. It's a key. Mark, I said, my voice flat and cold. A key that was used on Thursday afternoon at 2:14 p.m., without my permission. I've already changed all the passwords and remote codes, of course. I just wanted to formally revoke your access. The mask slipped. For 1 second. Tessa's bright, entrepreneurial smile vanished. I saw her mind working. The quick, sharp calculation of an abacus. What did I know? How much did I see? She was re-evaluating her exposure. Then the smile snapped back, wider than before. Oh, goodness. Of course we wouldn't dream of intruding. We're just trying to help. She glanced at her watch, a pantomime of surprise. Wow, look at the time. I actually have to run. I have to deliver an item to a customer downtown. You know, the side hustle? It never stops. She grabbed her purse and kissed Mark on the cheek. You stay and chat with your mum. Honey, I'll see you back at home. Tessa, I said, stopping her as her hand touched the doorknob. She turned, her body tensed. We must do this again soon, I said, my voice smooth as silk. You're so good with organizing. You should come back next week, and we can go through the heirloom storage in the attic together. See what other value is hiding up there. It was a trap, laid in plain sight, an invitation to the rest of the inventory. Tessa's eyes met mine. She knew it. I knew it. I'd love to. She lied. She pulled the door open and was gone. Mark did not stay long after Tessa fled. The manufactured concern evaporated, leaving an awkward, hollow silence. He muttered something about a conference call and left the half-eaten waffles on the counter. The moment his car turned the corner, I began my next phase. The performance of the frail, confused retiree was over. I was now compiling a case file. I first called the Asheville Police Department's non-emergency line. I did not dial 911. This was not an emotional outburst, but a request for procedure. I was routed to a desk sergeant who listened with a practiced, tired patience. Ma'am, he said, after I explained the situation. Disputes over property between family members are almost always a civil matter. You need to contact a lawyer. This is not a dispute, I said, my voice as cold and precise as a new ledger entry. This is felony theft. I have digital video of the unauthorized entry using a key she possessed. I have the item listed for sale online, using my home in the photographs. The person who entered my home is the person selling my property. The sergeant's tone sharpened. I understand. That does change the classification. My advice, ma'am, is to gather every single piece of that evidence. Compile it. The video file, the screenshots of the listing, any serial numbers, and especially the high-resolution photos you mentioned. The more organized the file, the better. Bring it to the station. We can open a file, but without witnessing the transaction, it's difficult to act. He had confirmed my strategy. I thanked him and hung up. The police were one tool, but they were a blunt instrument. I needed a scalpel. On Monday morning, I was at the office of Avery Lachlan, Esquire. It was a small, second-floor office over a bakery downtown, smelling faintly of roasted coffee. I had been referred to her by a former colleague from Northgate. The recommendation was succinct. Avery doesn't tolerate fools and gets results. Avery was a woman in her late 50s, dressed in a perfectly tailored grey suit. Her desk was immaculate. She listened to my entire summary for 10 minutes without a single interruption, her eyes fixed on mine. I presented the facts. I did not weep. I did not editorialize on the betrayal. I simply handed her the thin file I had prepared. This is the spreadsheet, I said, detailing the missing items. This is the USB drive with the doorbell camera footage. time-stamped. These are the printed, time-stamped PDFs of the Blue Ridge Finds listing. And here are my original photographs of the cabinet, compared side by side with the listing photo, showing the identical scratch on the brass handle. Avery put on her glasses and reviewed the documents. The silence in the office was absolute. "Mrs. Sutter," she said finally, looking up. "This is the most organized initial client meeting I've had in a decade. This isn't a family problem. This is theft by acquaintance, and your daughter-in-law has been incredibly sloppy." "She believes I am old and senile," I stated. "That assumption is her primary vulnerability," Avery replied, a very slight, very cold smile touching her lips. "We have options. I will handle the civil side, but we must act quickly to retrieve the property before it's sold to an innocent third party." She tapped the printout of the cabinet. "The listing is still active. Have you considered buying it? I will not pay her for my own property." "You won't," Avery agreed. "You will arrange a controlled buy. You will create an anonymous buyer account. You will engage with the seller. You will offer cash. And you will insist on a public meeting place, a supermarket parking lot, somewhere with cameras. You will not, under any circumstances, hand over any money. You are there only to positively identify the item in person." "And then what?" "And then you alert the police officers you've already spoken with. You tell them the time and place of the meeting. They observe. The moment you confirm it's your property, they intervene to recover it. It's clean." I agreed. It was a logical, necessary step. "In the meantime," Avery continued, turning to her computer, "I am drafting a spoliation letter. It is a formal legal notice, sent certified mail, return receipt requested, to both Mark and Tessa's home address. It instructs them to preserve all evidence, all digital records, all text messages, all emails, and the property itself related to this matter. If Tessa deletes that Blue Ridge Finds account after receiving this, she is demonstrating consciousness of guilt. It makes my civil suit for damages very straightforward." While she typed, I made notes. "I have already disabled all old access codes." "Good," Avery said, not looking up. "Now, go home and call a locksmith. Have the smart lock physically removed and replaced with a new brand. Today. Then, I want you to call every major consignment shop and antique dealer in a 50-mile radius. Register your name on their Do Not Consign list. Describe the armchair. Tessa is trying to flip these items. If the cabinet sale gets complicated, she'll try to offload the chair through a legitimate business." I pulled out my insurance policy. "My antiques rider requires an appraiser's report for a claim." "Schedule 1, Avery said. "Not for the missing items, but for the remaining collection. We need a professional valuation of what was taken, and a formal report stating those specific pieces are absent from the documented collection. We build the file. We build the pressure." I stood up, placing my checkbook on her desk. "What is your retainer?" $5,000, she said. I wrote the check. I left her office with a checklist. Evidence, photos, valuation, legal contacts. Back in my quiet house, I made the calls. I scheduled the locksmith for that afternoon. I scheduled the appraiser for Wednesday. I registered my name with 5 consignment shops. Then, I sat at my desk, opened a new anonymous email account, and created a new profile on the marketplace. I named it Nora Wren. I navigated to the Blue Ridge Finds listing. I clicked Message Seller. My hands were perfectly steady as I typed. "Is the walnut cabinet from the 1980s still available?" The reply from Blue Ridge Finds was almost instantaneous. The digital chime startled me in the quiet of my office. Yes, still available. Very popular. I have 2 other offers. Can you put down a $100 deposit via payment app to hold it? The seller was in a hurry, eager, sloppy. I typed back as Nora Wren. I do not use payment apps. I am an older buyer and prefer to deal in person. I can be at the Pine Gate supermarket parking lot on the east side at 7:30 this evening. I will bring the full $800 in cash, but I must inspect the item before I pay. I added the final hook. I always prefer to inspect and pay with cash. It's simpler. A pause. Then, okay, 7:30, Pine Gate lot. I will be in a white box truck. The seller had confirmed. I immediately called the desk sergeant I had spoken to earlier. I gave him the account name, the location, and the time. 7:30 p.m., Pine Gate parking lot. The seller, in a white box truck, will be meeting me. I will be the older woman in a blue sedan. We can have a patrol car in the area for observation, the sergeant said, his voice now fully engaged. Do not hand over any money. Ma'am, give us a signal, or just step away and we will approach. If it's your property, we will recover it. I agreed. I spent the next several hours preparing. I printed a high-resolution 8 by 10 copy of the marketplace photo and 3 of my own original photos, including the close-up of the brass handle scratch. I placed them in a manila envelope. I also took my small ultraviolet flashlight from the desk drawer, from the same security kit. I took a tiny, transparent sticker, no larger than a hole punch, embedded with UV fibers. My plan was simple. If she was foolish enough to bring my property, I would inspect it. While pretending to check the joinery or the finish, I would press this sticker firmly into a hidden groove in the wood. It was an insurance policy, a final, definitive mark of evidence that I, Eleanor Sutter, had physically handled this stolen item. At 7:20, I pulled into the sprawling, brightly lit lot of the Pine Gate. I parked, as promised, under a tall lamppost, my blue sedan visible. At 7:28, a small white box truck pulled into the row opposite me. It was the same truck I had seen parked in the alley behind my house. Devon's truck. A man got out of the driver's side. It was Devon, my new neighbour, though he was poorly disguised in a dark hoodie and a blue surgical mask. He looked nervous, his eyes darting around the lot. He went to the back of the truck, undid the latch, and rolled up the door. There, under the harsh fluorescent light of the parking lot, was my cabinet. I got out of my car, holding my envelope. I walked slowly, deliberately. You are Blue Ridge Finds. Just helping her out, Devon said, his voice muffled by the mask. She's busy. You're Nora. I am. I stood in front of the cabinet. It was real. The ache in my chest was sharp. A sudden, cold anger. I ran my hand over the walnut veneer. It's beautiful. I moved to the front, my eyes going immediately to the bottom drawer. There it was, the small, crescent-shaped scratch on the brass handle. Identical. It's from an estate sale, I think, Devon volunteered, shifting his weight. A really high-end one. The craftsmanship is lovely, I said, moving my hand along the side, feeling the dovetail joints Thomas had been so proud of. I let my fingers trace a groove near the back panel. Where did you say you got it? He was distracted, looking at a car that had just entered the lot. My fingers pressed the small, adhesive sticker deep into the wood grain, out of sight. Look, do you want it or not? He said, trying to be tough. 800, cash. I stepped back, holding my envelope. It's perfect. At that moment, blue and red lights flashed, reflecting off the supermarket's windows. A patrol car, which had been sitting dark at the end of the aisle, pulled up, blocking the box truck's exit. 2 officers stepped out. Devon threw his hands up almost immediately. Hey, I'm just doing a delivery. I'm just a mover. Ma'am, are you all right? The first officer asked me. I am, I said. This man is in possession of my stolen property. I handed him the envelope. The second officer shone a heavy flashlight on the cabinet, while the first compared it to the photos. The scratch. It's a perfect match, the officer said. He looked at Devon. Sir, we are impounding this item as evidence in a theft investigation. What? No! I'm just the driver. Devon was panicked, pulling his phone from his pocket. Look, she just paid me to pick it up and meet a buyer. I run a moving gig. The officer took the phone. Who hired you? This number. Devon said, pointing. She texted me the addresses, the pickup address, and this drop-off. I'm just running a job. The officer looked at the screen, then at his partner. He read the number aloud. It was a number I recognized. It was Tessa's cell phone number. We'll need a formal statement from you, Mr. Devon, the officer said, handing the phone back. And you, ma'am, we will take custody of the cabinet. They were loading my husband's work into their SUV as I walked back to my car. The first entry in my evidence column was now closed. With the cabinet secured in a police evidence locker, the immediate threat was gone. But the victory was small and cold. It answered what and how. But the more sickening question of why remained. Avery called me the next afternoon. Eleanor, she said, her voice crisp. I ran a standard background check on both your son and daughter-in-law. The picture is becoming very clear. I sat at my desk, my spreadsheet open. Go on. Tessa is drowning in debt, Avery said. She has over $40,000 in outstanding credit card balances across 4 different cards. But the real problem is a peer-to-peer business loan for $50,000, taken out 8 months ago. The repayment terms are aggressive. She's in default. And Mark? I asked, my hand steady as I made a note. Mark hasn't been consulting, Avery said. He was let go from his management position 6 weeks ago. There's no record of a new consulting business. The money coming into their joint account has stopped, but the spending hasn't. The pieces clicked into place. The fight last year about estate planning wasn't a philosophical difference. It was the beginning of a financial assessment. Thank you, Avery, I said. That explains the motive. It explains the desperation, she corrected. Desperate people are predictable. I'll continue to prepare the civil filings. Now I knew what to look for. I went back online, but this time I wasn't searching for my furniture. I was searching for Tessa. The Blue Ridge Finds account was now deleted, of course. But I had her full name. I searched her name combined with consignment and Asheville. It took less than 5 minutes. She ran an online lifestyle boutique. It was a semi-private account on a different platform, but it wasn't hidden well. The business name was Curated Carolina Living. My blood ran cold. The profile picture was of Tessa, smiling, holding a cup of coffee. She was sitting in my garden, on the stone bench Thomas had set. I scrolled through the feed. The account was a gallery of my life, repurposed for sale. There was a photo of a silver picture frame, captioned "Classic Sterling Silver," perfect for a touch of timeless elegance. It was my wedding picture frame, placed artfully on my living room mantel. There was a brass table lamp, the one from my guest room, glowing on my cherrywood side table. One-of-a-kind vintage brass adds such warmth. She had been using my home as her lifestyle backdrop. She was curating my possessions, taking photographs, and then, I realized, slowly and methodically listing them. The items from her feed, they matched the inventory list I'd given my insurance company, piece by piece. This was not a random theft. It was a systematic liquidation. This new knowledge recontextualized everything. I went through my own credit card statements, looking for small, strange charges. 3 weeks ago, a charge for $75 to Asheville Lock and Key. I had not called a locksmith. I called the company. I explained I was auditing a statement. The technician confirmed. He had been called to my address to replace a side door lock core by a woman who said her mother-in-law kept losing her keys. She had replaced my lock. She had her own key. The code in the smart lock was just a backup. I thought back to the security alert from my insurance company. The call to verify ownership. I called my agent, a man I had worked with for 20 years. "David," I said, "that security alert last week, the call you received, can you describe the voice?" He paused. "Eleanor, it was strange. The caller said she was your personal assistant, calling to confirm the details on the antiques rider for a new appraisal. She sounded young, very fast, very salesy. I told her we couldn't release information to anyone but you. She got quite insistent. I assumed it was a phishing attempt. A salesy voice, a voice like Tessa's. I scrolled further down the curated Carolina Living page. I found what I was looking for. A sold item from 2 months ago. 2 Queen Anne-style side chairs. They were a set, but the photo only showed one. A comment from a buyer. "Love the chair, picked it up last night. Do you still have the other one?" Tessa's reply. "So sorry. The other one sold to a different collector just an hour before." She had split the pair. She had sold Thomas's armchair. I checked the date. It was 2 months ago, long before I ever noticed. The void in my living room had been there for weeks. I just hadn't seen it, because I wasn't looking for it. The final damning piece came from my next-door neighbour, Mrs. Gable, an elderly woman who spent most of her day by her front window. I had called her, asking if she had seen any unusual vans. "Oh, heavens no, Eleanor. Not unusual," she said in her thin, reedy voice. "Just your daughter-in-law. I see her pop over all the time during the day. Such a devoted girl." "You see Tessa?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "Oh, yes. Often on Thursdays. She always wears those little white cotton gloves. I see her through your window, wiping down the tables and dusting your lovely things. I always thought it was so sweet, her helping you clean." She wasn't dusting. She was wearing cloth gloves to move the inventory. She was wiping away her fingerprints. This was not an impulse. This was not a desperate, one-time theft. This was a calculated, long-term business strategy. My son's wife had turned my home into her personal warehouse, my memories into her merchandise, and my grief into her profit margin. I called them on Tuesday. I used a voice I hadn't used in a year, a warm, conciliatory tone. I suggested we meet, to clear the air. Not at my house. Not at theirs. Neutral ground. A reconciliation dinner, I'd called it. The Riverbend Diner, 7 p.m. It's a place with vinyl booths that squeak and fluorescent lights that buzz. It smells like old coffee and fried onions. It is aggressively normal. They were waiting in a booth when I arrived. Mark looked visibly relieved, as if this meeting was his idea, a sign that things were returning to normal. Tessa was wary. Her smile was tight, her eyes scanning me, trying to read the angle. I slid into the booth, placing my handbag on the seat beside me. I also placed a simple, thick manila folder on the Formica table, right next to the metal napkin dispenser. "Thank you for coming," I started, folding my hands. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about the house, about streamlining." Tessa's posture relaxed almost instantly. She flashed a look at Mark C. "She's coming around." "Mum, that's great," Mark said, leaning forward. "It is." I agreed. "But before I sell the house or get rid of anything, I need to do a proper inventory. For the insurance, you understand. I was hoping you could help me document what's missing." "Missing?" Tessa's voice was sharp. I opened the folder. I did not raise my voice. I simply slid the first document across the table. It was my spreadsheet. "Stolen assets, Sutter residence." Mark squinted at it. "Mom, what is this?" I slid the next page over. The high-resolution, time-stamped screenshots of the Blue Ridge Finds listing. Then, the third page. A photograph taken by an Asheville police officer showing my cabinet, my husband's cabinet, sitting under the lights of the police impound bay. Tessa reached for her glass of water. Her hand jerked. A violent, sudden spasm. The glass tipped, sending ice and water cascading across the table, flooding the napkin holder and soaking the front of her expensive silk blouse. "Oh, God," she gasped, jumping back, grabbing at the wet napkins. Mark stared at the photo. He looked from the picture of the cabinet to Tessa, then back to me. His face was pale. "Mum, I don't understand. This has to be some kind of marketplace scam. A mix-up." "There is no mix-up, Mark," I said quietly. I reached back into the folder. I pulled out a stapled set of papers and slid them across the damp table, stopping them just short of the puddle. "This," I said to Tessa, "is a copy. The original was delivered by certified mail to your apartment this afternoon. It is a spoliation letter from my attorney, Ms. Avery Lachlan. It formally instructs you, and Mark, to preserve all evidence related to this investigation. That includes all digital records on your phones and laptops, all account logins, and all physical property currently in your possession, your apartment, or any mini-storage unit rented in your name." Tessa had stopped dabbing at her shirt. She was frozen. "I have an appraiser scheduled for Wednesday," I continued, my voice level. "He will be conducting a full valuation of my remaining collection. The police have this inventory. Ms. Lachlan has this inventory. Any attempt to move, sell, delete, or otherwise streamline any more of my property will be considered tampering with evidence and the treading of stolen goods." Mark was speechless. He just shook his head. Tessa, however, found her voice. She had been cornered, and she did the only thing she could. She attacked. She produced a short, sharp laugh. "Mark," she said, turning to him, her voice dripping with pity. "Honey, listen to her. This is exactly what we were worried about. Lawyers. Police. Evidence. She's paranoid. She's obsessed. She turned her gaze to me, her eyes hard and bright. Eleanor, you are not well. You are confused. You're misplacing things and blaming us. You're harassing our friends. She looked back at Mark. This proves it. We need to take this seriously. We need to get that power of attorney finalized. You are clearly not in a position to be making your own decisions. Eleanor, you're not capable. It was the move I had been waiting for. The final, desperate play. I let her words hang in the air of the diner. I let Mark look at me, his eyes filled with doubt and a pathetic, desperate hope that she was right. Then, I reached into my handbag. I did not reach for the folder. I pulled out a single, tri-folded document. I thought you might say that, I said. I unfolded the paper and slid it across the table to Mark. That is a full cognitive and memory assessment conducted by Dr. Alistair Finch last Tuesday. I requested it the day after I discovered my property was missing. Mark picked it up. His eyes scanned the letterhead, the signature, and the summary. As you can see, I said, my short-term recall, long-term recall, and executive function are all in the 99th percentile for my age group. Dr. Finch's professional conclusion is that my capacity to make financial and personal decisions is, in his words, exceptionally sound. I am an accountant. Tessa. I do not proceed without documentation. Now, shall we discuss the contents of your storage unit? The diner meeting ended in a cold, brittle silence. Mark and Tessa left without finishing their meal, leaving the cognitive assessment report sitting on the damp table like an indictment. They paid the check and walked out into the night. I drove home, the squeak of the vinyl booth still in my ears. The confrontation was over. The escalation was about to begin. The call came the following morning. It was not Avery. It was Detective Miles from the Asheville Police. Mrs. Sutter, he said, his voice clipped and professional. I'm calling to update you on your case. The alert we put out on the armchair got a positive hit. The owner of a high-end consignment shop, the Maple and Hemlock Collective, called it in this morning. He was suspicious. He has the chair, I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. We have it now. The owner said a man came in yesterday afternoon, very nervous, looking to consign it for a quick cash sale. The consignment receipt was signed L. Devon. Your neighbour? Devon, I said. He was trying to unload the evidence after the cabinet was seized. Looks that way, but the shop owner is meticulous. He had us check the item before he'd report it. I sent an officer with a UV light. He found your mark exactly where you said it would be. Initials ES, underside of the right armrest. The chair is now in our custody. And Devon. This is the important part. Mrs. Sutter. The owner's suspicion wasn't just about the name, it was the delivery. He has excellent security cameras. The person who signed the form was Devon, but the person who actually brought the chair into the shop, 30 minutes earlier, it was a woman. She wore a baseball cap, pulled low, but the camera caught a clear shot of her profile as she was leaving. It's your daughter-in-law, Tessa. She had used her mover as a proxy, but had been foolish enough to handle the merchandise herself. I relayed the information to Avery. I could almost hear her smile through the phone. That's the nail. Eleanor. That's the physical act of trafficking stolen goods. She's panicking, and she's getting sloppy. I've been doing some digging of my own. What did you find? Mark, I was reviewing the financial disclosures you provided. You're still listed as a beneficiary on one of his older savings accounts. It gave me limited access. I found a pattern. Multiple small transfers, $300, $500, over the last 6 weeks, moving from his account to Tessa's curated Carolina Living business account. The memo line on every single transfer is the same: shipping and logistics. My son wasn't just a bystander. He was the financier. Avery, I said. She has a mini storage unit. I've seen the bills on her kitchen counter. I know, Avery said. I'm looking at the petition right now, based on the recovery of the chair, Tessa's direct involvement, the evidence of a conspiracy, and Mark's funding. I am filing for an emergency warrant to search that storage unit. A judge will sign this. This is no longer a dispute. It is an active criminal enterprise. The warrant was granted by 3 p.m. Detective Miles and 2 other officers met Avery at the storage facility. Avery insisted I stay home. She would call me the moment they were finished. The call came at 5:30. Avery's voice was different. It was cold. Eleanor, we are done here, and you need to prepare yourself. What did you find? We found it all. The silver picture frames from your mantel, the brass table lamp, the small wooden music box that Thomas kept on his desk. They were stacked in bins, ready to be photographed. I closed my eyes. She took his music box. She took them. Eleanor. And we found her business equipment, including a digital, bank-grade cash-counting machine. Avery took a deep breath. But that is not what we found. There was a small desk in the unit. Detective Miles opened the drawer. Inside, there was a single USB flash drive. Silence. They had a laptop in the patrol car. Avery continued, her voice flat. They opened the drive. It was her entire business catalogue. Hundreds of photos of your belongings, taken inside your home. Before shots, staged on your tables and against your walls, and after shots, on a white background, ready for her website. Avery. That's not all. There was one other file on the drive, a spreadsheet. It was titled Asset Liquidation Plan. It was an inventory of your entire home. It had columns for item description, target price, and net profit. And then, Eleanor. It had a final column, a 4th column. She paused, and I waited. The column was titled, Mom Will Not Miss This. My breath caught. The cruelty of it, the clinical, dismissive arrogance, was sharper than the theft itself. The police have everything, Avery said, her professional tone returning. Every item, every bin, the cash counter, and the flash drive. It is all being bagged, tagged, and logged as evidence. The district attorney's office has been briefed. This is a felony case. What happens now? I asked. My voice was hollow. Now, you do exactly what I say. Avery commanded. You do not call them. You do not answer their calls. You do not respond to their texts. You maintain absolute public silence. Let them sit in their apartment and wonder what just happened. Let the evidence speak for us. I sat in the living room. The house was silent. The wall where the shaker cabinet had stood for nearly 40 years was a blank space of painted plaster, punctuated by the 2 small nail holes where I had hung a calendar every January. The floor beneath was pale, untouched by decades of sunlight. The absence was a physical presence in the room. My dining room table was no longer set for a meal. It was my command center. Spread across the polished wood were the files Avery had returned to me, the grainy screenshots of the Blue Ridge Fines listing, the cold, official police photos of my cabinet under impound lights, the copy of the consignment receipt for the armchair, signed by Devon. I went through them one by one, checking them against my own spreadsheet. I was not doing this to stoke my anger. Anger is a hot, inefficient emotion. I was doing this as I would any final audit, ensuring every entry was verified, every account balanced. The ledger had to be closed properly. I looked at the empty space where Thomas's armchair had been. I could almost see him sitting there, reading his newspaper. He had a philosophy about the things he built. "Eleanor," he told me once, when I worried over a scratch on the dining table, "this is all just wood and screws. It's built to be used, not worshipped. The furniture is just a container. The memories are yours. Don't ever let anyone else set the price on those." Tessa had tried. She had put a price tag on my memories. $800 for the cabinet. She had calculated the net profit on my life, and she had filed my existence under "Mom will not miss this." She was wrong on both counts. I stood and walked through the quiet rooms. I ran my hand along the cool stone of the windowsill in the kitchen, the one that caught the best light. I knew its exact angle, how the morning sun hit it in March, the perfect spot for proofing bread. I touched the brass lamp in the hall, the one Avery had recovered from the storage unit, its base cold. This house was a map of my life, and they had tried to tear out the pages. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Maeve, my granddaughter, Mark's daughter from his first marriage, before Tessa. Maeve was 22, sharp, and had her grandmother's intolerance for nonsense. She answered on the second ring. "Grandma." "Maeve, dear, I am calling to tell you something, not to alarm you." "Is it about Dad? Is it Tessa?" "It is," I said. "Things have been happening. Things are coming to a head tomorrow morning. There will likely be noise. Official noise. I need you to know that if you hear about it, I am perfectly safe. And I am fine." There was a pause on the line. "She did something, didn't she? After that fight last year. She's been stealing from you." I hadn't realized anyone else had seen it. "Yes. I'm on your side," Maeve said, her voice turning hard as steel. 100%. What time tomorrow?" "I'm not sure of the exact time. Avery is handling it with the police." "I'll be there," Maeve said. "I'm not letting you go through that alone. I'll be there." She hung up before I could protest. Knowing Maeve would be there settled something in me. I began my final preparations for the morning. I went to the front door and checked the new smart lock. Battery 98%. I checked the doorbell camera feed and ensured the motion detection sensitivity was high. I plugged my phone into the charger on the nightstand. I felt a chill, though the house was warm. I went to the hall closet and took out Thomas's old wool cardigan. It was a dark grey, worn soft at the elbows. I slipped it on. The scent of him was long gone, replaced by the faint smell of cedar. But the weight of it was a comfort. In the kitchen, I prepared the coffee pot. I filled the reservoir with water and spooned the dark roast into the filter. All I would need to do in the morning was press the button. My last stop was my office. I took a large manila envelope. Into it, I placed a copy of the finalized inventory of stolen goods. I added the official appraisal report from the man who had come on Wednesday, which noted the item's absence. I included a set of photographs showing my UV initials glowing under the black light on the recovered chair. I sealed the envelope and addressed it to my insurance agent. David. It was ready for the mail. Before going to bed. I stopped in the living room again. I walked to the window and unlatched it, cracking it open just an inch. The air that came in was cool, carrying the sharp scent of pine from the mountains and the familiar, dry smell of the old wood of the house. I was not afraid. I was not angry. I was an accountant, and a column in my ledger was about to be balanced. I was ready for the morning. I was in my kitchen. The coffee pot I had set the night before hissed, the dark aroma filling the warm room. I was wearing Thomas's grey cardigan. My phone was on the kitchen table. The speaker activated, but the line was silent. Avery Lachlan was waiting with me. 7:42, she said, her voice quiet. They are at the door. I did not have to imagine the scene. I had the address memorized, the Overlook at Boocatcher, a sleek, modern building that Tessa loved. I knew Detective Miles and 2 uniformed officers were standing outside her apartment door. They were not there to ask questions. They were there to execute a search and recovery warrant. Avery's voice was tense. They are knocking, announcing. Tessa opened the door. I pictured her, confused, annoyed, perhaps in an expensive robe. She saw the uniforms. She saw the warrant in the detective's hand, and her face, I am sure, turned to ice. And then she saw Maeve. My granddaughter was standing 20 feet down the carpeted hallway. She was not crying. She was not yelling. She was perfectly still. Her phone held up, the red recording light on. A family witness, documenting the balance sheet. They are entering the apartment, Avery murmured. The officers did not have to look far. Just inside the entryway, stacked against the wall, were 2 items. My cherrywood rocker and the brass table lamp. Both were wrapped in bubble wrap and packing blankets, taped securely. On a small console table next to them sat a stack of pre-printed shipping labels. They were ready to ship today. Then, Mark emerged from the bedroom. He was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and shorts, rubbing his eyes, confused by the noise. Tessa, what is going on? He stopped. He saw the uniforms. He saw the officers placing evidence tags on the lamp. He arrived just in time to hear Detective Miles begin listing the items they were legally seizing as stolen property. He arrived just in time to hear the officer begin to read Tessa her rights. You can't. Tessa's voice, which I could not hear, was surely sharp. Those are mine, I bought them. They're from an estate sale. But the officers were prepared. Detective Miles pulled out his ultraviolet flashlight. He ran the beam over the underside of the rocker. My initials. ES glowed bright, validating my claim. Ma'am, the detective said, his voice flat. We have the UV markings. We have the original photographs from the owner. We have the consignment receipts signed by your associate. And, he added, holding up the bagged USB drive taken from the storage unit, we have your sales ledger, your profit projections, and your inventory list. The match is absolute. My phone chimed. It was not Avery's voice. It was a text message from her, appearing on my screen. Recovery almost complete. Report finished. It's prosecutions now. I read the words. Prosecution. The final column in the ledger. At the apartment, the officers began carrying my property out. Tessa stood by the open door. Defeated. Mark, beside her, was grey, speechless. Maeve stopped recording. She walked forward, past the officers, and stopped directly in front of Tessa. She was holding a single sheet of paper. It was the printout of the Blue Ridge finds, listing the one showing my cabinet, with the reflection of my living room window in the glass. Maeve pressed the paper into Tessa's hand. "You know where this is," she said. The coffee pot clicked. Finished brewing. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. "Avery Lachlan," I answered. "Eleanor." "It is all on file. Eleanor," Avery said. Her voice was calm, the audit complete. "They have her, and they have Mark for financing the operation. Everything is accounted for. You did the right thing." I ended the call. I reached over and turned off the coffee machine's warming plate. I walked to the kitchen window, the one I had cracked open the night before. I unlatched it fully, and I pushed it wide open. The cold, clean mountain air flooded the room. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious. Where in the world are you tuning in from? Please let me know in the comments below. Share your thoughts and subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and consider hitting that hype button to help it reach more people who need to hear it.